Climate campaigners took their protests to the heart of the city today. Extinction Rebellion claimed they were bringing sustained economic disruption by gathering in large numbers close to the Bank of England. 76 people were arrested, including a 77-year-old rabbi who was praying on the pavement. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Extinction Rebellion!
When climate change activists demand green transport solutions, this is probably not what they have in mind. For a start, you don't get to choose your destination when you're being carted off by police officers. But in the last 7 days, hundreds of Extinction Rebellion supporters have had this treatment after being arrested. Today, the protesters laid siege to Bank Junction at the heart of the Financial Square Mile, or at least tried to.
Are you arresting me? I don't know what you're talking about.
Bank Junction is closed to all traffic apart from buses and bikes for 12 hours a day. So today's disruption was largely felt by bus passengers. These double-deckers were trapped for 4 hours before the drivers were given the OK to go into reverse. By and large, this junction is only used by buses and bikes. Blocking it's not very green, is it?
No, it's not true that it's used only by buses and bikes. There's also plenty of stuff coming here to and from the major financial institutions in the area. And, well, we want to make sure that they are alert to the fact that we're here and that we're not going away.
Even if not going away involves lying on cold, wet roads and pavements.
I'm sound, I'm not cold. I'm fighting with adrenaline, so I'm good.
At one point, the protest parted to allow a fire engine on a 999 call to get through. Later, a breakaway group set up camp outside the offices of BlackRock, an American-based investment company.
We will not tolerate the destruction of our planet.
Extinction Rebellion wants the city to pull the plug on the oil and gas industry and concentrate its cash on green energy. The plan here was for a group of activists to glue themselves to the front windows of the building, but the police were too quick for them.
I was hoping to glue myself to the front door of BlackRock, but I got rugby-tackled by 2 large policemen and didn't quite make it to the door.
So you need to stand up, please.
Throughout the day, the arrests continued. This rabbi is among more than 1,400 people who've been detained since the protests began a week ago. Simon Harris, ITV News in the city.
Good evening. After more than a week of protests across the capital, the standoff between Extinction Rebellion and the police got serious today. Last night, the Met placed a ban on any more demonstrations. And today, in response, the climate campaigners launched legal action of their own, claiming that the police are trying to criminalise them. The protests carried on regardless in Westminster and tonight at Buckingham Palace, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
The police were out in force, but the protesters' response to the ban was predictable. They don't call themselves rebels for nothing. Instead of obeying the Met's instructions to end the disruption, the activists closed a busy road in Westminster. They parked a caravan on Millbank and, for good measure, made sure it couldn't easily be moved.
I've got a wristband, I've got a chain, I've locked it on. It's incredibly safe. We've had lots of training. XR, I feel very looked after by XR.
It wasn't long before the arrests began. The police have decided to use Section 14 of the Public Order Act, aimed at preventing serious disruption to the life of the community. The switch in police tactics seems to have come as a surprise to London's mayor. Sadiq Khan issued a statement challenging senior officers to explain, as he put it, why this was necessary. The mayor argues peaceful protests are a right so long as the law isn't broken. But the new response from the police was welcomed by those who think the protests have been tolerated for too long.
We've got roads being blocked by these people. Londoners need to get on with their lives. And yet what's Sadiq Khan doing? He's now, it looks like he's moving away from the police line on this. It's ridiculous. We need to keep law and order in our city.
But the activists aren't taking the ban lying down. They first became aware of Scotland Yard's new tactic when police began clearing protesters from Trafalgar Square last night. Now there's talk of a legal challenge.
We've been very clear, and we've been clear with the police in our liaison teams, that rebellion would last for 2 weeks and we would disrupt to raise attention of the climate and ecological emergency.
What about the £16 million it's cost so far in policing?
Well, I wouldn't want to put a price on the lives of your loved ones and the rest of the country.
Tonight, Scotland Yard defended its decision to impose new conditions on the protesters, effectively banning them from gathering.
The reality is, where we've had people glued onto premises, locked together, it's a time-consuming process that takes officers a great deal of work to release them, and the disruption that they've given on our communities in London, we felt that it is proportionate and reasonable at this stage to impose the conditions that we put on last night.
And the response to that was equally defiant. This evening, Extinction Rebellion targeted Buckingham Palace, with protesters, many of them pensioners, going ahead with a planned demonstration and sit down in front of the gates.
So what's going to happen next with these protests then, Simon?
Well, Geraint, here at Buckingham Palace, there is still a small, quiet and fairly measured protest going on outside the palace gates, with a line of police officers making sure the protesters don't get close enough to chain themselves to the railings just in case they're tempted to do so. We're also told that the demonstration at Millbank is still continuing, so part of that road is blocked. Now, you'll remember that this was day 9 of what was promised to be 2 weeks of an autumn uprising by Extinction Rebellion, and as far as we can tell, Extinction Rebellion are determined to keep to that timetable. But in response to the police decision to impose this so-called Section 14 of the Public Order Act to limit gatherings of more than 2 people, they're planning to challenge that in the High Court, and we understand that process is about to begin.
Some mixed messages as well today from City Hall.
Yes, the political opinion on this protest has come down on party lines, as you'd imagine, with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, supporting the police action, and Diane Abbott, the shadow Home Secretary for Labour, saying that an outright ban is completely wrong. That's kind of left the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, in a slightly awkward position. He, of course, is the elected Police Commissioner for London, so the Met would expect to have his support. So his suggestion today that he was unaware of the ban until it happened, and demanded an explanation from senior officers, did come as something of a surprise, not least to the police, who said, as far as they were aware, City Hall was kept informed by the usual liaison meetings that take place.
OK, Simon, thanks very much.
And our political correspondent Simon Harris will be asking politicians from all parties about the protests in his political programme, The Late Debate. He's in our studio in Westminster this evening. Simon.
Duncan, the protests this week have raised questions not just about Extinction Rebellion's tactics, but also those of the police. There was a row between the Mayor and senior police officers when the Met decided to get tough. On The Late Debate, we discuss whether the police got it right or wrong, and was Sadiq Khan trying to run with the hare and the hounds?
That kind of action, for people who are just trying to go about and do their daily, work and get on with their lives, is not bringing people to the cause. So I think they should think again in that respect about the tactics.
We'll also try to assess how London MPs might vote on Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. That's The Late Debate here on ITV after news at 10.
Simon will be watching, and there'll be much more on the Brexit developments on the evening news at 6:30 with Mary Nightingale, who is in Brussels.